Chapter 23. Upon hearing a growl and then the sound of gnashing teeth close by, Dan swore aloud. Their cat was making a repast of some fish that he had found near one of the fishing boats. "You vulgar, pestering animal, how could you?" he shouted as he grabbed Damianos by the scruff of the neck from the hollowed ground where he had been devouring his succulent lunch. "You're going to smell to high heaven for the rest of our trip. You look as if you could do with a bath." And with these words, Dan marched to the edge of the water and dropped the enraged feline into the rolling waves. When he let go of the cat and was about to turn around, he heard Damianos holler, "This isn't fair, Dan. I was going to show you another place to bathe and luxuriate under the Riviera sunshine. But now maybe I'll take you to Siberia instead." Malou, Damien and Salangi couldn't stop laughing at the sight. The poor shepherd was soaking wet. Hair and cloak matted with blobs of sands and clusters of mollusks attached to his sleeves and pants. "Please, Damianos," Malou pleaded between giggles. "Let's not go to Siberia. I can't stand the cold and blizzard." "Quite, my dear. I understand," Damianos said, making his way out of the water and joining the couples. "And I don't think blizzard conditions will help you. That is if your next task doesn't require resilience and hardiness." "Why don't you see what the book has to say about all this?" Damien suggested, handing it to Dan. He was about to open the volume when the four of them saw Damianos step away and turn toward the market. "Where are you going?" Dan shouted after him. "To change into dry clothes," their shepherd replied. "I'll be on hand sooner than you think," and disappeared amid the crowds. Dan and Malou smiled while returning their attention to the open book. "Thus far, you have shown tolerance, acceptance, patience, determination, and even compassion toward your fellow man. Now it is time for you to face temptation and the indulgence necessary to avoid your falling at the grips of evil. Indulgence will steer you away from the wrong temptation. However, indulging in desirable or appealing things in life could be detrimental to your well-being and could be very costly indeed." "A bit more complex every time," Malou remarked, lifting her gaze to Salangi. "I always thought that indulgence meant something like tolerance. Can you explain the difference?" "Well, my dear," Salangi replied, "if you're tempted to drink a glass of wine, you're indulging in some of the good things in life. But if you were to drink the bottle empty, you would have fallen into the wrong temptation and been exposed to the evil of alcoholism." "All right," Dan said. "So what you're saying is that we should have moderation in everything we do, is that it?" He looked up at Damien. "Ha, ha, ha." Damien laughed. "Yes, Dan, but there are some indulgences that are not good for you, even in small amount." "Like doing drugs?" "Not exactly, Dan," Damien went on. "You see, let's say you were tempted to spend a few hours with a gorgeous woman and decided to end up in her bed. It would be considered as indulging too much in a good thing and very detrimental to your well-being, I should say." "And the repercussions would be severe," Malou added with a smirk directed to Dan. "I don't think I would turn toward any woman in order to indulge in a few hours of pleasure," Dan said, shooting a quirky glance to Malou. "Ah, but you see, that's what temptation is all about, Dan," Salangi said. "In order for you to know the difference between good and bad, you have to see the bad before you can appreciate the good." "Okay then, let's see what Damianos has up his sleeve, besides barnacles, for us now," Dan said, sniggering and looking toward the marketplace. What they experienced next was far beyond the realms of their expectations. They were driving, Dan at the wheel of an expensive convertible sports car, down a paved road leading to a town nestled at the bottom of a mountain cliff by the ocean. Instinctively, Dan slowed the car down to a crawl when he realized how precarious the hairpin turn ahead of them was. "What the hell?" Dan bellowed. "You could at least have told us about this, you darn cat." There were plummeting cliff faces on their right and precipices to their left. One wrong move and they would reach the village below in a deafening crash. "But he's not here," Damianos said after she turned around to see if Damianos was in the back seat. "Where is he? And where are we going?" "That's what I'd like to know," Dan shouted above the noise of the roaring engine. "Let's get to the village in one piece first," Malou said, "and maybe we'll find him in the hotel or just appearing out of nowhere as he usually does." "I hope so, and because I'm beginning to lose my patience with him, and having us drive down this road when we don't even know where we are or where we're supposed to go is a little much." "Well, let's just enjoy the scenery, okay?" Malou suggested. "This is a beautiful day. We're not in Siberia, and you're driving a Ferrari convertible, a car you always wanted to own, wasn't it?" "I guess you're right, hun. But that cat is something else. I bet we'll meet him somewhere in town, tempting us all with all sorts of things. But that's his job, sweetheart. Let's be grateful we've made it this far. Malou paused, looking pensive. Do you realise that we'll be halfway through our tasks when we're done with this one? If we get through alive, Dan said, taking the next hairpin turn cautiously. I'll admit, I would love to own a car like this, but this road wouldn't be my first choice to take it for a test run. It's far too dangerous. I'm just a ball of nerves right now, you know that? He turned his gaze briefly to Malou. I know, hun. Just take it easy and we'll be all right. A half an hour or so later they arrived at the village by the sea. The first thing Malou noticed as they were driving along the shore was that the beach was covered of small stones, each a little larger than a pebble. We must be in the south of France, she said. I've read something about these beaches. They're really difficult to cross under the sun. Apparently you could burn your feet before getting to the water. And do people lie on these pebbles? Dan asked, looking around to see if there were any bathers on the beach. This is early yet, sweetheart. Look, the sun is hardly over the horizon. Malou pointed to the cliffs overlooking the road. I guess you're right. And you know what? No, what? Well, I don't know about you, but I'm hungry. He turned to look at Malou. She wore a light summer dress and a scarf over her hair. She looked ravishing. I know we've been told that time has stopped for us, but I can't help but feeling hungry. Now that you mention it, I could eat something too, but maybe we shouldn't be tempted. Oh, don't you start, Dan snapped abruptly. If being hungry is a temptation, then we will be tempted every day of our lives. Yes, but tempted by the wrong choice of food may be what we need to watch. Remember, Solanke explained something about a glass versus a whole bottle of wine. Yes, I know, Malou, but having some toasts and coffee couldn't be wrong now, could it? Yes, and that's another thing they mentioned, something about knowing the bad to appreciate the good, Malou rejoined. All I can tell you is that right at this minute, I would love some bacon and eggs, pancakes and a large bowl of fruit with a good coffee. You were all right with the toasts and coffee, but when you talk about bacon and eggs and pancakes, that's where you'll fall into temptation and indulge in too much of a good thing. You sound like Damienos, you know that, Dan chortled. Okay, why don't we find a cafe somewhere and have a bite to eat? Sounds like a plan, Dan agreed, smiling at his lovely wife. They turned into the centre of town soon after and found a little bistro opening up for business. The owner was outside arranging tables and chairs on the sidewalk. Dan parked the car by the curb and the both of them got out. Will you be serving breakfast soon? Dan asked the man. Early, aren't you? The latter replied, looking up at the two tourists. Ah, there you are. We're expecting you to ride with us on the drive down here. Did you enjoy your new car? Damienos asked, placing a couple of more chairs beside a table near the establishment. I would have if it hadn't been for driving on such a dangerous road, but the scenery was fantastic, I must admit. It was just a bit of a surprise, that's all. Good, and you're here to have breakfast, I gather. Yes, that's the general idea. Anything against us being hungry or having something to eat? No, nothing that I can think of, except that you should watch your diet. You don't want to put too much strain on your heart. My heart? What are you talking about? Listen to me, Dan, Damienos said, his face very stern. You are going to be faced with some very difficult months when you go back, and part of the difficulty will be due to the wanting to indulge in your favourite foods, your occasional bottle of wine, and whatever you fancy at the time, yet your heart will be working double time to get you back on your feet. A bit of everything is much better than a large serving of too many of your favourites. Okay, enough with the lecture already. I've got to eat something right now, that's all I know. Maybe you should re-examine your previous tasks once again, and in particular patience, because every time you're faced with something that is liable to frustrate your desire, you show impatience. Having watched that little exchange somewhat anxiously, Malou intervened. And is that why you brought us here, in France, because the French are renowned for their small portions? Yes, Malou, that's part of the reasons for you being here, but I hope you, Dan, understand what I've been suggesting, have you? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm often acting like a bear when I'm hungry, but tell me, Damienos, what do I do when I have such an appetite? It's often difficult to stop myself from eating anything I like, especially with Malou's cooking. Ah, yes, of course, Malou's cooking, he smiled at her. She's been tempting you with the most marvellous dishes, hasn't she? Do you mean I should change the way I cook? Malou asked. Perhaps it would be a good idea to try some new recipes, yes. Well, I'm all for trying new things, Dan said, pulling up a chair for Malou. As long as it fills me up when I need it, he added, sitting himself down. I can offer you some croissants with strawberry jam for a start, Damienos suggested. With an excellent coffee, a real latte, that is. How's that sound? Are they the same as the ones we buy at the bakery at home? Not quite, Malou, but these are better for you. But how do you expect me to find the same things when we get back? That will be up to the nutritionist to tell you when Dan is out of the hospital. Okay then, let's try these famous croissants and see how they fare against my appetite, shall we? Truth be told, Dan thoroughly enjoyed his croissants and the coffee and felt quite replete afterward. Only 2 of these croissants are enough to fill my tummy, Malou remarked, wiping her mouth with a serviette. Then turning to the car, which was still parked by the curb, she shrieked in horror, "They're stealing it, Dan! Look!" Up from his chair in a bound, Dan ran to the car and the 2 fellows who were ready to drive off with it. "What do you think you're doing?" he shouted, grabbing the man behind the wheel by the hair. "Hey, let go of me!" the guy yelled back, turning on the ignition and pressing on the accelerator. In a moment, Dan's new Ferrari was gone. He shook his head and returned to the table. He plopped himself down, looking at Malou. "What are we supposed to do now?" "I've no idea, Dan. Maybe this was one of Damianos' tricks. But what would stealing a car have to do with temptation, do you think?"